When Nolan calls the vote, you let him win. Owen said it so calmly that I thought the medication had confused him. He sat at our kitchen table, one hand around a mug he had stopped drinking from. Lake effect snow pressed against the windows. The oxygen machine sighed every few seconds. What vote? The emergency one he'll schedule after I'm gone. Owen had been dying for 4 months. The doctors no longer used hopeful language. Neither did we. But until that evening, Owen had never spoken of death like an appointment on the company calendar. We can talk tomorrow. No. He caught my wrist. Tonight may be the last time I can explain this properly. For 34 years of marriage and 29 years in business. We had put difficult facts on the table, so Saturday, Owen reached for the battered dispatch notebook beside his medication tray, the kind we had used when Whitaker Cold Freight was 2 leased tractors and a borrowed loading bay in Superior. He wrote, Unit 714, below it, 2:17 a.m., he circled both, a northbound run. Remember it when everything they show you looks complete. Who is they? Don't waste my energy pretending you don't know. I knew. Nolan Pierce had married our daughter 11 years earlier and risen to chief financial officer. He was polished where Owen and I were blunt, able to make a bad quarter sound temporary and a delay sound planned. Lately, I had started calling that control. Kelsey is with him, I said. Owen looked toward the window. I stood and began clearing things that did not need clearing. When I could not solve a problem, I organized the space around it. Kelsey thinks you chose the company over her, Owen said. She works there. That isn't the same as being chosen. 2 years earlier, I had left Kelsey's birthday dinner when a driver overturned near Ashland. Nobody was hurt. The cargo was saved. I called it a successful night. Kelsey called it proof. I kept the company alive for her. I know. But every time she asked for a mother, you gave her an explanation. Anger rose, useful and familiar. But Owen looked smaller than he had that morning. And I could not spend one of his last clear hours defending myself against something I knew was true. Nolan will bring the board a crisis, he said. He'll have documents, dates and Kelsey beside him saying the company needs stability. What kind of crisis? I don't know the finished version. You expect me to let him take what we built? Yes. His voice broke into a cough. I adjusted the oxygen line. When his breathing settled, he said, do not defend yourself at the first meeting. Do not mention this conversation. Do not stop them from removing you. Are you protecting me, or do you think I can't handle him? You handle people the way you handle storms. Direct route. Maximum force. That works until the storm is your own daughter. I looked at the notebook, Unit 714. 2:17 a.m., what have you done? Enough to make sure the truth still exists outside that building. Where? Not with you. That frightened me more than an answer. If you know too much, you'll act too soon. Nolan will clean up whatever I missed. And if I do nothing? You watch. You remember. You let him believe the paperwork worked. I wanted names and copies. Instead, he had given me a truck number and a time. What happens after I lose? You become the one person nobody thinks can hurt them. 6 days later, Owen died just before sunrise. There was no mystery. His nurse had warned me his breathing had changed. I sat beside him until the pauses became longer than the breaths, holding his hand while snowplows scraped the street outside. Kelsey arrived 20 minutes too late, hair wet with snow. You could have called sooner. I called when the nurse told me. You always wait until there's nothing left for anyone else to do. I wanted to show her my phone and explain every minute. Then I heard Owen's voice. Every time she asked for a mother, you gave her an explanation, so I said, I'm sorry. Kelsey's face tightened, as if the apology had arrived in a language she no longer trusted. The memorial was held Tuesday in the heated maintenance bay at our Duluth terminal. Owen had hated funeral homes and loved working equipment. One of our oldest tractors stood washed clean behind the podium. Nolan spoke beautifully about discipline, loyalty, and the livelihoods carried inside every trailer. Kelsey stood beside him, composed and pale. When it was my turn, I managed 4 sentences before my throat closed. 3 hours later, Nolan asked me upstairs. The boardroom overlooked the snowy loading yard. 6 board members were seated. Kelsey stood near the screen. On the wall was a photograph of a refrigerated trailer covered in frozen condensation. One rear door hung open. Crushed white shipping containers lay inside beneath a gray cloud of cold air. At 2:17 this morning, Nolan said, a northbound medical shipment suffered a complete temperature control failure. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. 2:17, I checked the trailer number in the image. It was not 714, Owen had known the time, but not the finished version of Nolan's story. The shipment was intended for 3 hospitals. The loss exceeded $8 million. The insurer and lender had been notified. A denied claim could put Whitaker Cold Freight in default before week's end. I listened without interrupting. Kelsey looked at me. Grief was there, but so were old anger and fear. This happened because we kept delaying the fleet upgrade. I warned you. I had inspection schedules, compressor replacements and driver reports in my memory. I knew enough to tear holes in Nolan's presentation. Instead, I folded my hands. Nolan placed a document before each board member. A temporary maintenance waiver authorized continued operation after a compressor alarm was reported 48 hours earlier. He slid the final copy toward me. My name appeared at the bottom, not typed, not pasted, authenticated through my executive credential, with the approval token assigned to my office. Given the financial exposure and concealment of a known safety issue, Nolan said, I'm requesting an immediate vote to remove Mara Whitaker from operational authority. Every instinct told me to stand and destroy his argument before it became fact. Then I saw Owen's handwriting in my mind. Unit 714, 2:17 a.m., I left the document untouched. For the first time in my life, I let silence do the work. The vote took less than 9 minutes. 3 board members would not meet my eyes. 2 studied the maintenance waiver as if the truth might reveal itself through the paper. The 6th, a retired banker named Harold Vance, asked Nolan whether the insurer had confirmed the loss. Not yet, Nolan said. But until they do, we have to assume full exposure. $8 million in ruined hospital medicine. A possible rejected insurance claim. A loan covenant tied to our loss ratio. Nolan had built the crisis so every question led back to the same answer. Me, Harold cleared his throat. The motion is to suspend Mara Whitaker from all operational and financial authority pending an independent review. Nolan Pierce will serve as interim chief executive. Kelsey stood behind Nolan's chair. Her arms were folded tightly enough to crease the sleeves of her black memorial dress. Mom, she said, you should say something. For one dangerous second, I almost did. I could have explained that no dispatcher would send a medical load north without a second temperature confirmation. I could have demanded the original telematics report. I could have pointed out that the trailer in Nolan's photograph was not Unit 714, but Owen had known the time. 2:17, he had known a vote was coming, and he had told me to lose it. I have nothing to add, I said. Kelsey's face changed. Not relief. Not exactly. It looked more like disappointment confirming an old belief. Harold called the vote. 5 approved the suspension. 1 abstained. Nobody voted against it. Nolan waited until the decision was recorded before closing the folder in front of him. For the protection of the company, access restrictions will take effect immediately. My company laptop locked while it was still open. The spreadsheet on the screen disappeared, replaced by a gray message stating that my credentials were no longer active. A second later, my phone vibrated. My company email, fleet dashboard and internal messaging applications all signed out at once. Nolan held out his hand. I'll need the company phone. It contains personal messages from Owen's final week. IT will preserve anything unrelated to company operations. I'll remove them myself. Mara, we can't allow a suspended executive to alter or delete data. His tone was careful. Respectful enough for the board. Firm enough to remind everyone who now controlled the room. I placed the phone on the table. Kelsey flinched when it touched the wood. That small reaction told me more than Nolan's speech had. She had expected a fight. Maybe she had prepared herself to hate me for making one. Instead, I stood. Is there anything else? Nolan looked almost uncertain. Security will accompany you while you collect personal belongings. I know the procedure. I wrote it. The security officer waiting outside was Daniel Webb, a former driver Owen and I had promoted after a back injury ended his time on the road. Daniel had eaten at our house. His oldest son had used our garage to rebuild a transmission one summer. Now he stared at the floor. I'm sorry, Mara. You have a job to do. That was what I always gave people when emotions made them uncomfortable. A task. A rule. Permission to hide inside responsibility. Daniel walked with me to my office, through the glass wall. I could see Nolan remaining at the conference table while board members gathered around him. He occupied the center seat Owen had used for 20 years. Snow moved across the windows behind him, slowly erasing the tire tracks in the yard below. My office contained 3 decades of decisions compressed into shelves and drawers. Driver awards. Route maps. Photographs from the first terminal. A rusted trailer seal Owen had framed after we completed our first profitable winter. Daniel handed me a cardboard file box, personal items only. I packed the framed photographs, Owen's old brass desk ruler and a wool scarf Kelsey had given me years ago. I left the rest. At the door, I turned toward the cabinet where we kept printed emergency procedures. Daniel shifted his weight. I can't let you access company records. I was looking at the cabinet. He lowered his voice. Then keep looking from there. The top drawer was not fully closed. A thin strip of yellow paper showed between the drawer and frame. Someone had left something where I would notice it, but not where I could take it without Daniel reporting me. I looked away. Not yet. By the time we reached the main floor, the news had already moved faster than I had. A local business reporter stood outside the front gate beside a camera crew. 2 hospital procurement officers waited in the lobby with Nolan's legal counsel. One of them recognized me, Ms. Whitaker. Is it true your company knowingly operated a defective refrigeration unit? Daniel stopped beside me. I could feel employees watching from the dispatch windows. I'm not authorized to speak for the company. The sentence tasted like metal. The hospital representative stepped closer. Patients could have lost access to critical medication because of this. Kelsey appeared at the top of the stairs. My mother has been suspended pending review, she said. All public questions should come through me. My mother, not Mara. Not the founder. Not the person accused, my mother. For half a second, I heard the little girl who used to sit under my desk after school drawing trucks on invoice paper. Then Kelsey faced the camera. Whitaker Cold Freight recently discovered that outdated maintenance practices may have contributed to the loss of a temperature-sensitive medical shipment. The board has taken immediate action to protect our customers, employees and hospital partners. Every word was controlled, no direct accusation. No legal overreach. Just enough for everyone listening to understand who had approved those outdated practices. I looked at her until she noticed. Her voice almost faltered. Then Nolan came down the stairs and placed one hand lightly against her back. Kelsey finished the statement without looking at me again. Daniel escorted me through the loading area instead of the lobby. The yard had gone strangely quiet, engines were running, but nobody moved. Drivers sat behind their windshields watching me cross the packed snow with a cardboard box in my arms. Dock workers stood beside idle pallet jacks. A mechanic held a wrench at his side as though he had forgotten what he meant to do with it. Their fear was larger than the accusation against me. If the insurance carrier denied the claim and the lender accelerated the loan, Whitaker Cold Freight might not make payroll. More than 200 families depended on a company now being described as reckless before anyone had verified that the cargo was ever destroyed. At the employee gate, I touched my badge to the reader. The light turned red. Daniel opened the gate manually. I walked through without saying goodbye. My personal checking account still worked. My house still belonged to me. No court had restricted where I could go or whom I could call. Nolan had not taken my freedom. He had taken my authority and placed my name between the company and a disaster. That was enough. I drove home through thickening snow. By the time I reached the house, 3 news alerts had appeared on my personal phone. One called the incident a leadership failure. Another quoted an unnamed company source claiming I had resisted fleet modernization for years. The third used a photograph of me standing beside Owen at a driver safety ceremony. They cropped Owen out. Former vendors began calling. Most wanted information. Some wanted distance. One retired board member left a voicemail saying he hoped I would do the honorable thing before innocent employees paid the price. I deleted nothing. At 7 that evening, Kelsey arrived alone. She did not remove her coat. We need to talk. You already spoke for both of us on television. It wasn't television. It was a local feed. That distinction must be comforting. Her jaw tightened. This is exactly what I mean. Everything becomes a contest with you. I poured coffee because making coffee was easier than asking my daughter whether she had helped frame me. She did not touch the cup. The lender issued a technical default notice, she said. We have 10 business days to prove the insurance coverage or bring in additional capital. Who told you? Nolan. Did you read the notice? I don't need another interrogation. It was a question. No. With you, questions are just accusations wearing clean clothes. I sat across from her. She looked exhausted. There were shadows beneath her eyes and a split in the skin beside her thumbnail where she had been picking at it. Kelsey had done that as a teenager before exams. Fear, real fear, but fear did not tell me whether she was trapped inside Nolan's plan or helping him execute it. What do you want from me? I asked. Stop fighting. I haven't fought anyone. That's worse. You're waiting. The words landed too accurately. Kelsey leaned forward. Nolan can keep the lender calm if the board shows stable leadership. But if you challenge the suspension, contest the waiver or start calling employees, the bank could assume there's an internal control breakdown. So I'm supposed to disappear. You're supposed to keep everyone from losing everything. There it was, the phrase Owen had predicted without ever hearing it. Kelsey, did you see the original cargo report? Her eyes moved away from mine. I saw what the board saw. That wasn't my question. She stood so quickly that the coffee moved in its cup. This company consumed our entire family. Dad gave it his body. You gave it every hour you had. I am not going to let your pride destroy what's left. Is that what Nolan told you this is? My pride? He told me facts. Then bring me one. For a moment, I thought she might. Instead, she pulled on her gloves. There will be an agreement tomorrow. You surrender your voting shares, the company continues your salary for 1 year and Nolan makes sure the board does not pursue damages against you personally. How generous. It gives you a way out. Of the company Owen and I built. Of the disaster you created. The words came fast. Before she could soften them, her face changed immediately. But she did not take them back. I opened the front door. Kelsey stood there breathing hard, snow collecting in her dark hair. I'm trying to save people, she said. So am I. She left without answering. The next morning, Nolan's settlement arrived by courier, 12 months of salary. Continued health insurance. A mutual non-disparagement clause. In exchange, I would surrender all voting rights, resign from the board and agree not to contact employees, customers, insurers or lenders about company business. He did not want me retired, he wanted me isolated. I read every page, placed the agreement back in its envelope and set it beside Owen's dispatch notebook. Unit 714. 2:17 a.m. At noon, I drove toward the terminal. My badge turned red at the outer gate, just as it had the day before. I did not try it again. I parked across the road near a closed tire shop and watched trucks enter and leave through the snow. 20 minutes passed before a faded blue sedan pulled in behind me. Tessa Moreno stepped out carrying a paper grocery bag. She had managed dispatch since our first year in Duluth and had never confused loyalty with obedience. I'm on lunch, she said. This is not a company meeting. I didn't ask you to come. I know. That matters. She got into the passenger seat and placed the bag between us. I'm not stealing files for you. I'm not accessing anything I'm not authorized to see. And I'm not risking the pension my husband and I have spent 30 years building. You shouldn't. But I keep manual shift sheets because computers fail and drivers lie. From the grocery bag, she removed a folded yellow page, the same color I had seen inside the half-closed cabinet drawer. I wrote this during the overnight shift, she said. My handwriting. My log. My authorized record. I unfolded it. The page listed every trailer movement between midnight and 4 in the morning. At 2:17 a.m., Unit 714 had not been northbound, it had not been carrying hospital medicine, it had been parked empty inside the secured maintenance lane, with its rear doors open and its refrigeration unit disconnected. I read the entry twice, then a third time. Nolan's photograph had shown the wrong trailer, his report had described a trip that Unit 714 never made, and Owen had known exactly where the first lie would appear. Knowing where a lie began was not the same as proving who built it. Tessa kept her hands over the grocery bag while I studied the yellow dispatch sheet. Is this the original? My shift log. The carbon copy went into the overnight binder. Where's the binder now? Inside dispatch, unless paper suddenly became dangerous. We need the digital report, I said. Tessa gave me a tired look. You've been suspended 1 day, and you're already saying, we. What is that supposed to mean? You don't ask whether people are willing. You decide what they can do and start assigning. I'm trying to protect 200 jobs. You've always been protecting 200 jobs. That's how you explained every funeral, birthday and conversation you missed. My instinct was to defend myself. Instead, I heard Owen's warning about giving explanations when people needed me. I'm sorry, I said. Tessa looked up. I treated loyalty like an available resource. You deserved better. Then she removed a folded printout from her coat. Nolan emailed this to every dispatcher. We have to sign a revised incident acknowledgement before the end of shift. The digital report identified Unit 714 as the medical trailer. It showed a northbound gate release at 1:03 a.m. and a temperature alarm at 2:17. Tessa's handwritten log showed Unit 714 entering the secured maintenance lane at 11:38 p.m. and remaining there until after 4. Both records could not be true. Did you sign? No. What happens if you refuse? Nolan reminded supervisors that the lender may force payroll cuts. Then he reminded us the company pays most of our family health coverage. Not a direct threat. He had placed health insurance beside obedience and let frightened employees connect them, who saw the trailer in maintenance. Luis Mendoza disconnected the refrigeration unit. Daryl Knox moved it. Will they confirm that? Yesterday, yes. Today, I don't know. I reached for my phone. Tessa stopped me. No employee calls from you. Nolan wants to claim you're interfering. Then how do I verify it? Lawfully. Priya Desai read my suspension order, Nolan's settlement and both dispatch records, then moved them away from me. Tell me exactly how each page reached your hands. Tessa explained the manual log in company-wide email. Priya recorded the time, place and method, no restricted systems. No borrowed passwords. No asking employees to search outside their duties. Contaminate the evidence, and Nolan makes the case about you. I built those systems. You no longer control them. Priya agreed to advise me under 3 conditions: original documents preserved, every transfer recorded and no access without authorization. She photographed the pages, sealed the originals and had Tessa sign a receipt. Then she asked who had installed our tracking system, Lakeline Telematics. Evan Hargrove managed the transition before Nolan terminated his contract. Priya called Evan from the conference phone. He answered from a service garage in Eau Claire. She asked how historical vehicle data was stored. Company dashboards can be corrected, he said. Driver names, load numbers, route descriptions. But raw sensor packets are mirrored to an independent archive for insurance compliance. Can Mara request it? Not as a suspended executive. Can you access it? I can explain it. I cannot enter a former client account. Priya sent preservation notices to Lakeline. our current vendor and the insurer. By late afternoon, the insurer released a limited compliance export because my name appeared on the claim and I remained a shareholder. Unit 714's temperature line remained flat because its refrigeration unit had been disconnected. Its coordinates never left the maintenance lane. At 2:17 a.m., it was exactly where Tessa's sheet said it was. Then Priya opened the shipment identifier. The hospital medicine had been assigned to Unit 682. Trailer 682 left Duluth shortly before 1, traveled north and completed delivery outside International Falls at 5:42 a.m. Its cargo stayed between 36 and 38 degrees for the entire trip, no failure. No destroyed medicine. The shipment Nolan claimed we had lost reached its destination safely before Owen's memorial began. Tessa stared at the screen. Then what was in those photographs? Priya enlarged the image Nolan had shown the board. Broken white containers covered a trailer floor. Near the rear door, a blurred shipping label carried a red diagonal stripe. I recognized it. That's a quarantine label from the Superior Overflow warehouse. 3 months earlier, a failed roof drain had contaminated veterinary insulin already marked for destruction. We had photographed the cleanup for another insurance claim. Our broker sent the closed file because I was a named policyholder. The same photographs were there, different crop and date. Same containers and frost pattern. Nolan had taken images from an old warehouse loss and presented them as a new hospital medicine disaster. Until then, I had been trying to prove I was innocent. Looking at those photographs, innocence became too small a goal. Someone had manufactured a default capable of destroying the company and forcing a sale. Clearing my name would not stop it. I needed to find where the money was going. Then Luis Mendoza called. His voice was low when Tessa put him on speaker. They offered me 6 months severance and health coverage through summer if I cooperate with the review. What does cooperate mean? Tessa asked. I signed the revised statement saying I saw 714 released before midnight. You didn't. Silence. My wife starts treatment next week. Tessa closed her eyes. I understand. He disconnected. One witness had been purchased with the one thing he could not risk losing. We proceed without him, Priya said. I looked at Tessa. You should return before they use this against you. And do what? Protect your pension. Protect your family. That's the first time you've asked what this costs me before asking what I can do. She returned to the terminal before evening shift change. Priya and I kept working. The insurer's file included a dispatch recording Nolan said captured the first temperature alarm. A dispatcher identified Unit 714. A driver reported rising temperature. 11 seconds later, the dispatcher ordered him to pull over. I asked Priya to play it again, stop after the trailer number. The transition was too clean. We compared it with audio from the old warehouse claim. The original contained background noise, a printer, a rolling chair and someone coughing near the radio. In Nolan's version, that noise vanished for 11 seconds and returned at the exact same level. A section had been removed. It did not prove who edited it, but it justified preserving the source recording. Priya sent another formal notice. Near 9, she opened Nolan's expense summary. 3 emergency cleanup vendors had been paid within hours of the supposed loss. North Shore Recovery Services, Arrowhead Cold Disposal and Great Lakes Incident Response. Together, they billed $684,000 for pharmaceutical destruction, containment and environmental monitoring. I've never approved any of them. All 3 were created within 7 months, Priya said. And these invoices came from the same template. Same spacing. Same grammatical error. Same bank routing intermediary. Priya entered the intermediary's registration number into a commercial database used by her firm. 4 associated accounts appeared. 3 belonged to the cleanup vendors. The 4th belonged to Harbor Ridge Redevelopment. I knew the name. 2 years earlier, Nolan had invested in a luxury condominium project on Duluth's waterfront. Construction stalled when financing costs rose. He told the board his exposure had been resolved. It had not. Harbor Ridge was Nolan's failed real estate partnership. The fake cleanup invoices were not just supporting his story, they were feeding the financial hole he had been hiding. Priya printed the Harbor Ridge registration and placed it beside the cleanup invoices. This connects Nolan to the money. she said. It does not yet prove he created the medical loss claim. He authorized the payments. Then we preserve that fact and keep working. We do not stretch it into conclusions the evidence cannot carry. I hated her restraint because it was correct. Before I could answer, an encrypted email arrived from Owen's private attorney, Maren Solberg. Under an escrow agreement signed 7 weeks earlier, she was required to release a digital archive if 3 things happened: Owen died, I lost operational authority and the lender issued a default notice. All 3 had happened. Maren verified my identity by video call, then spoke with the careful calm of someone delivering another person's final instructions. Owen wanted you to understand that this is not a completed investigation. It contains documents he lawfully preserved, concerns he could not resolve and instructions for protecting the originals. Why didn't he give it to me himself? He believed you would confront Nolan before the records were secure. The answer hurt because Owen had said nearly the same thing on his final clear night. Priya recorded the download, verified the file and copied the untouched archive onto 2 encrypted drives. One went into her evidence cabinet. The other became our working copy. There were folders for board correspondence, lender communications, fleet compliance, vendor payments and succession planning. There was also a folder labeled Kelsey, and one video. I opened the video first. Owen appeared at the desk in our downstairs study wearing the gray cardigan Kelsey had given him for Christmas. The oxygen line ran beneath his nose. Each sentence cost him more breath than the one before it. Mara, if you are seeing this, Nolan moved faster than I hoped. He explained that Nolan had begun describing ordinary maintenance costs as proof of fleet instability. Temporary cash pressure became structural weakness. Routine succession questions became requests for the loan provisions governing emergency management changes and collateral sales. Owen had challenged him. Nolan told the lender he was preparing for continuity because Owen was dying and I resisted modernization. In one email, he warned that grief might make me operationally unpredictable. He had started building the story of my failure while Owen was still alive. But Owen did not know about the fake hospital shipment. He did not know the photographs were old or that Harbor Ridge was receiving cleanup money. I do not have the whole truth, he said. Do not turn my suspicions into facts. Finish the work properly. Even dying, he knew exactly which part of me needed correcting. A snowplow passed outside Priya's office. Amber light moved across Owen's recorded face, then he looked down. There is one thing I have not known how to tell you. I opened Kelsey's folder. The first document was an internal incident report from 6 weeks before Owen's recording. A backup temperature sensor on Unit 682 had gone out of calibration during a routine delivery. The primary system remained stable. No cargo was damaged. The problem was small but reportable under our lender agreement. The mechanic's note said the sensor was replaced the next morning. The final report said it had been replaced before the trailer returned to service. At the bottom were 2 authenticated signatures. Nolan Pierce, Kelsey Pierce. The attached emails left no room for misunderstanding. Kelsey asked Nolan whether the corrected date was accurate. He replied that reporting the lapse would trigger a fleet review, freeze seasonal hiring and possibly eliminate 28 jobs before Christmas. Kelsey wrote, I will sign if you confirm there was no cargo risk and no driver was endangered. Nolan confirmed it, then she signed. She had knowingly approved a false compliance report. Not to steal the company. Not to frame me. She had done it because Nolan placed 28 employees on one side of the decision and one dishonest sentence on the other. A later message showed how he used it. If Mara challenges our financial decisions, remember what a compliance review would mean for you personally and for everyone depending on us. It was not an explicit threat, it did not need to be. Her first lie had become his leash. I need to speak with her, I said. Not alone, Priya replied. She is your daughter, but she is also named in evidence. Kelsey came to Priya's office that evening. Priya told her the meeting was voluntary and that she could obtain separate counsel before answering anything. Then she placed the report on the table. Kelsey did not deny it. Her shoulders dropped. Nolan said it was a paperwork correction. You knew the date was wrong, I said, yes. Why sign? Because he said the lender would freeze the winter routes. 28 people would be gone. You could have come to me. And you would have reported it. Yes. That's why I didn't. The answer hurt more than denial. You would have followed the rule, she said. Then you would have called the layoffs necessary and gone home believing you protected the company. Priya stopped the argument before it grew. Did you know the hospital shipment was staged? No. Did you know the photographs came from an older loss? No. Did you create the maintenance waiver under your mother's credentials? No. Did Nolan discuss forcing a sale? Kelsey hesitated. He said outside capital might be the only way to save the company. He never told me he was manufacturing a default. I believed part of her. That was the worst part. She had not designed the entire fraud, but she had signed the first false report, defended Nolan publicly and helped remove me before asking enough questions. She was neither innocent nor fully informed. What are you going to do with this? She asked. It belongs with the evidence. Her face tightened. You know what that could do to me? Yes. She walked to the window, then turned back. Have you ever chosen me over the company? I opened my mouth, but no answer came that did not sound like another explanation. Kelsey gave a small, broken laugh. That's what I thought. This is not a choice between you and the company. It always is. You just call the company the truth when you need the choice to sound noble. She left before I could stop her. That night, I sat at Owen's desk preparing the evidence drive for Calvin Reed, the insurer's special investigations examiner. I copied the lender emails, vendor records, board correspondence and Owen's video. Then I reached Kelsey's folder. My cursor rested over it. Without that folder, we still had the false shipment, altered photographs and suspicious invoices. I told myself her earlier report was smaller and separate, but it explained Nolan's control over her, and if I removed it, he could later claim I had edited the archive to protect my daughter. For most of Kelsey's life, I had made decisions for her and called it protection. Her schools. Her jobs. Which risks were acceptable? I trusted my judgment more than I trusted her choices. Deleting the folder would be the same habit wearing the face of love. I copied it untouched. The progress bar crossed the screen in 2 seconds. It felt much longer. The next morning, Priya and I met Calvin at the insurer's regional office. He asked where every document came from before asking what any document meant. Priya handed him the complete archive, including Kelsey's report. Calvin signed the evidence receipt and sealed the drive. This gives us grounds to expand the investigation, he said. It does not guarantee the result you want. I understand. My phone vibrated before we left the room. Priya received the same notice. The lender had declared that Whitaker Cold Freight failed to cure its technical default. Based on the claimed uninsured loss, alleged control failures and declining cash position, it intended to sell the secured assets under the emergency remedies in our loan agreement. The Duluth Depot, the Superior property, every tractor, every refrigerated trailer, the creditor auction was scheduled for 5 days later. Nolan had not created the disaster merely to remove me, he had created it to put our entire company on the auction block before the truth could catch up. 5 days was not enough time to stop an auction by argument. Priya made that clear before I finished reading the lender's notice. The false shipment proves records were fabricated, she said. The old photographs prove deception. The vendor payments show a suspicious route. But we still cannot prove Nolan personally benefited. Calvin Reed sat across from us with the insurer's file open. Dana Mercer, the lender's fraud counsel, joined by secure video. If we move now, Dana said, Nolan will claim the vendors were chosen by staff and Harbor Ridge was unrelated to him. We might delay the claim. We may not stop the auction. So we let him take another payment. We let him choose whether to take one. Priya corrected. One cleanup company, Arrowhead Cold Disposal, still had an approved vendor profile. Its earlier invoices had used the same processor connected to Harbor Ridge. Dana's team prepared a controlled invoice matching that pattern. Final auction preparation and secured asset environmental review, $96,400, just below the company's secondary approval threshold. Nobody would instruct Nolan to pay it. It would enter through the lender-supervised vendor channel. He could reject it, question it or authorize it. If he approved it, The money would move into a monitored holding account. Your job, Priya said, is to make him believe the auction is safe. I had spent my life solving visible problems. Now success required me to look defeated while Nolan completed his own fraud. Tessa objected when I told her, "We met in the back of a diner near the harbor. You're trusting the lender that scheduled the auction," she said. "I'm trusting the controls around the operation." That sounds like the old Mara. Clean plan, straight lines, everybody expected to behave. I started explaining, then I stopped. What am I missing? Nolan knows someone accessed the telematics archive. He's reviewing badge logs and asking who still talks to you. You're looking forward. He's looking backward for someone to punish. She was right. What do you want to do? I keep working and listen. The second he changes my access, I leave. No files. No passwords. No heroics. Tessa almost smiled. You're learning how to ask. That afternoon, I called Kelsey. I reviewed the agreement, I said. I'm ready to surrender my voting shares. Silence. What changed? I'm tired. That required no acting. I won't admit negligence. The board must release me from civil liability and state publicly that my resignation resolves the governance dispute. I think Nolan can accept that. I want it in writing. An hour later, Nolan called from Owen's former office. Kelsey says you're ready to be reasonable. I'm ready to protect myself. The board can release you after the shares transfer. Simultaneously. He paused. You'll sign at the creditor auction. That isn't necessary. It is for the lenders and buyers. They need certainty you won't challenge the sale. He wanted witnesses. Employees, buyers and board members would watch me surrender the company I had built. Fine, I said. After the call, I rehearsed the statement he expected. I accept the board's decision. I will not obstruct the creditor process. I am transferring my voting interest to preserve the company's remaining value. Then I placed the signature page beneath it and left the line blank. The controlled invoice entered the system at 4:12 the next morning. Dana's team watched through the lender's audit portal. Calvin observed through the claim investigation. Priya sat beside me and refused to let me refresh the screen every 30 seconds. At 4:26, an accounts payable clerk opened it. At 4:31, she routed it to Nolan. At 5:08, he viewed it from Owen's office. He downloaded the service summary. At 5:19, Nolan changed the payment note from environmental review to emergency collateral stabilization. Nobody had suggested that language. At 5:24, he approved the invoice with his executive credentials. The payment moved into the monitored account. Authorization preserved, Dana said. Device, token and payment instructions verified. It was not a confession, but Nolan had reviewed a suspicious invoice, disguised its purpose and routed it through the same pathway feeding Harbor Ridge. For the first time, the fraud had his direct hand on it. By noon, Kelsey delivered a revised surrender package to Priya's office. It released me from civil claims if I transferred my shares and waived any challenge to the auction. It also offered 18 months of salary, health coverage and a consulting title with no authority. A private escape package, I said, a way to survive this. What happens to the employees? The buyer keeps most operations. Most? I don't control their staffing plan. Then give Priya the vendor records. Kelsey's eyes hardened. I don't have them. You approved the public cleanup statements. You know who submitted the invoices. I'm not stealing company files for you. I asked you to preserve records already inside your authorized work. That makes me part of your case. You are already part of it. She looked at the unsigned agreement. I came here to help you. You came to offer protection without accountability. Because accountability with you always feels like punishment. No. It means the truth keeps the parts that hurt us too. Her face changed. You gave them my report. Yes. You could have protected me. I could have hidden evidence. That is not protection. To you. Before leaving, she said, sign at the auction. This offer will not improve. The retaliation began the next morning. Nolan's counsel sent Priya a supplemental evidence package claiming the hospital incident followed a long pattern of unauthorized maintenance overrides under my administration. The central record showed that 18 months earlier I had disabled an automated refrigeration shutdown on Unit 714. The credential was mine. The timestamp placed me at the terminal. The override code matched a procedure only senior operations staff knew. For several minutes, even I doubted my memory. Then I recognized the date. Owen and I had been in Madison negotiating our insurance renewal. My badge had entered the Duluth terminal because I had lent it to an IT technician replacing the reader outside my office, that had been careless and against policy. Nolan had found a real access weakness and built a credible accusation around it. This may be altered, Calvin said. It may also be authentic and unrelated. Until the source system is preserved, we cannot dismiss it. Evidence that should have cleared me now sat beside evidence suggesting I had manipulated safety controls before my removal. Nolan had discovered the archive access, then Tessa called, "I'm being walked out." Wind struck the microphone as the terminal doors opened. What reason? Failure to cooperate with the review. Unauthorized disclosure of dispatch material. Do not argue. Priya is calling your union representative. I know. Tessa, I'm sorry. This one isn't yours to carry alone. Daniel Webb escorted her across the frozen yard. Drivers watched from their cabs. Mechanics stood near the bay doors. Her badge flashed red at the gate. Nolan had removed the person who preserved the first honest record. That evening, I drove past the depot. Workers were locking personal tools into steel chests. Some wrapped chains through the handles because they believed the building might belong to someone else by morning. Owen's office remained lit above them. Behind the glass, Nolan was preparing altered records, auction schedules and final transfer documents. I parked across the road long enough for anyone watching to see an exhausted woman staring at the company she had lost. Then I drove home. On the morning of the auction, I wore the same dark suit I had worn to Owen's memorial. Priya carried the blank surrender documents. Calvin and Dana entered separately under the lender's authority. 10 minutes before we were called inside, Kelsey found me in the corridor. She looked as if she had not slept. Nolan prepared a criminal negligence referral, she said. The maintenance overrides, the waiver, the shipment report. Outside counsel is ready to file. When? The moment you refuse to sign. I studied my daughter's face. Is this a warning or another offer? Her voice dropped. It's the last chance I have to keep him from destroying you. Then stop protecting him. Kelsey looked toward the depot doors. I'm trying to protect you. No. You're asking me to make his threat unnecessary. The referral is ready, she said. If you refuse to sign, Nolan sends it to the county attorney, the insurer and every hospital client before this auction ends. Then he'll have to stand behind it. The auction filled our main maintenance depot with lenders, buyers, board members and local officials. Employees stood behind a barrier near the service bays while refrigerated engines idled outside. A digital display listed the depot, Superior property, fleet, equipment, contracts and customer accounts. Beside each line waited an empty space for the winning bid. Nolan stood near Owen's old podium with Kelsey and the private equity representatives. He wore the calm expression of a man who believed the difficult part was over. When I entered with Priya, the room went quiet. Nolan described Whitaker Cold Freight as weakened by outdated systems, poor oversight and a catastrophic medical shipment loss. He praised the buyer for offering capital and a path toward preserving the majority of existing jobs. The buyer guaranteed employment for only 90 days and could close Superior. Nolan was selling quickly enough to cover Harbor Ridge. Dana Mercer, the lender's fraud counsel, explained that ownership disputes and releases had to be resolved before bidding. Nolan placed my surrender agreement on a table facing the room. Mara, the board appreciates your decision to avoid further disruption. I sat. Kelsey placed a pen beside my hand. The agreement said I accepted responsibility for governance failures, surrendered my voting shares and waived any challenge to the sale. In return, the board would release me from civil claims. The criminal referral waited outside the agreement. I turned to the signature page. Priya stood before Ms. Whitaker executes any transfer, the lender requests the fraud review permitted under Section 11.6 of the Secured Credit Agreement. The auction clerk removed his hand from the keyboard. Nolan smiled. There is no basis for delay. This condition was invoked after receipt of authenticated evidence of possible fraud affecting the claimed default, Dana said. The numbers on the display froze. Nolan looked toward the buyers. This is Mara's interference. She has been accessing protected systems. Calvin Reed carried 2 sealed evidence cases forward. The records will be presented through independent custodians. He began with the photographs. One screen showed Nolan's images. The other showed the insurer's original file from the Superior Warehouse loss, same container. Same torn quarantine label. Same frost line. Calvin displayed the metadata and claim number. These photographs document veterinary insulin already designated for disposal after a warehouse drainage failure. They were taken 93 days before the event alleged here. Nolan folded his arms. I relied on materials provided by the claims team. Calvin opened the upload record. They entered the current claim package through an executive account authenticated to Nolan Pierce. Authentication does not prove who used a workstation. Correct. That is why we examined the shipment. A Lakeline Records custodian appeared by secure video and authenticated the independent archive where raw sensor packets were automatically preserved. Then the temperature graphs appeared. Unit 714 remained inside the secured maintenance lane from 11:38 p.m. until 4:16 a.m. Its refrigeration unit was disconnected. Unit 682 left Duluth, traveled north, and reached International Falls at 5:42 a.m. Its cargo temperature never left the required range. The distributors receiving record confirmed delivery. The medicine had arrived safely. There had been no $8 million loss and no event capable of triggering the default used to force the auction. A hospital representative stood. You told us critical inventory had been destroyed. Nolan pointed toward me. Based on maintenance records created under her administration. Priya called Tessa. Tessa walked forward with her manual dispatch sheet sealed in an evidence sleeve. She explained the overnight binder and carbon copy procedure. At 11:38, Unit 714 entered maintenance empty. At 12:47, Unit 682 took the hospital load north. Dana placed Nolan's altered report beside her sheet. The report had switched the unit numbers. Were you asked to sign the revised version? Priya asked. Yes. Did you? No. Nolan stepped forward. A suspended dispatcher with a grievance is not a reliable custodian. Tessa looked directly at him. I wasn't suspended when I wrote it. Her union representative produced the binder receipt showing that her carbon copy had been logged before Nolan's report existed. The buyers stopped taking notes. Nolan turned to Kelsey. Explain how the incident team assembled the report. Kelsey approached the microphone. At first, she repeated the public version. The board acted on available information and Nolan was trying to prevent layoffs. Then Priya displayed Kelsey's earlier compliance report, the first false report. The one she signed before Owen died, Nolan said, that is unrelated. It establishes the reporting pattern and the leverage used afterward. Priya replied. His email appeared beneath it, warning that a compliance review would expose Kelsey personally if I challenged his financial decisions. Nolan moved beside her. You signed because there was no cargo risk. Tell them. Kelsey gripped the podium. I signed because he said 28 employees would lose their jobs. Did you know the date was false? Priya asked. Yes. Did you know the hospital shipment arrived safely? No. Did you approve replacing Unit 682 with Unit 714? Kelsey looked at Nolan. He gave her the smallest shake of his head. No, she said. She is under extraordinary emotional pressure, Nolan said. Kelsey stepped away from him. I signed the first false report. I defended him before I understood what he had done. But I will not say my mother destroyed medicine that was never destroyed. I did not rescue her with an explanation or condemn her. Her choices remained hers. Nolan opened a red folder. The lender should also review the maintenance override performed under Mara Whitaker's credentials 18 months ago. The document appeared on the screen. My name. My executive credential. An override disabling an automated refrigeration shutdown on Unit 714, the room shifted toward me. This proves she manipulated safety systems long before I became interim chief executive, Nolan said. For several seconds, it looked exactly as he wanted. Then Priya asked Dana to display the credential custody record. My executive token had been seized after my suspension. Daniel Webb signed the receipt and sealed it in the security cabinet. Nolan's legal team checked it out 2 days later to preserve executive records. The override used against me entered the investigation package 4 hours after that checkout. The historical entry may be authentic, altered or unrelated, Priya said. But the token used to authenticate the submitted version was in company custody, not Ms. Whitaker's. Daniel stood, that receipt is mine. I sealed the token myself. Nolan's confidence vanished. Dana moved to the controlled invoice, a verified transaction map appeared. Whitaker Cold Freight Operating Account, Arrowhead Cold Disposal, the Shared Payment Processor, Harbor Ridge Redevelopment. The final $96,400 payment had followed the same route as the earlier cleanup invoices. Every step carried a timestamp. Every approval carried Nolan's credential. Dana played the banking verification recording. Nolan's voice filled the depot. Yes, I reviewed the vendor. Release it today. It has to clear before the auction. No one asked him to confess. His authority had recorded the story. The photographs entered through his account. The false report carried his approval. The vendor payment carried his credential. The money ended in the investment partnership whose debt he had hidden from the board. Dana stood. The lender is invoking the fraud suspension provision. The auction is paused immediately. No bids will be opened, no collateral transferred and no ownership release accepted pending the expanded investigation. The spaces beside the asset groups remained blank. Beyond the walls, refrigerated engines continued running. The company had not been sold. 2 state financial crimes investigators entered with Calvin's team. They secured company devices, credentials and records and required Nolan to accompany them for an interview. This is a financing dispute, Nolan said. Then the preserved records will show that, one investigator replied. He turned to Kelsey. Tell them this was Mara's plan. Kelsey lowered her eyes. I don't know everything she planned. Then she looked at him. But I know you lied to me. Investigators collected Nolan's phone, laptop and executive token. The token that had opened every company door disappeared into a numbered evidence bag. As they escorted him across the depot, employees moved aside without speaking. He passed beneath the frozen auction display. No winning bids, no completed sale, no surrender. Kelsey remained near the podium after the room began to empty. Without Nolan beside her, she looked younger and more tired than I had seen her in years. I walked toward her, then stopped before reaching for her hand. The truth stood between us. Including the part with her signature. Her voice was nearly lost beneath the idling engines. Was exposing everything worth losing your daughter? I did not answer her in the depot. Anything I said would have sounded like a verdict. Kelsey had spent years believing I would always choose the company first. Nolan had spent years teaching her that my silence proved him right, so I let the question remain between us. The auction was suspended that morning, but justice moved at the speed of documents, interviews and hearings. For the next 6 months, Whitaker Cold Freight operated under lender supervision. Calvin's team reviewed the insurance claim. State investigators copied servers and interviewed employees. There was no dramatic conviction before sunset. There was only the removal of Nolan's control. The private equity agreement was cancelled after the buyer admitted its offer depended on the disputed default and Nolan's promise that I would surrender my shares. The lender withdrew the auction notice once the medical loss claim was formally classified as fraudulent. Nolan was charged with wire fraud, insurance fraud and falsification of business records. He pleaded not guilty and waited for trial under conditions preventing him from accessing company systems, contacting witnesses, or moving assets tied to Harbor Ridge. Investigators recovered part of the cleanup money before it left the payment network. Nolan's partnership interest was placed under lawful restraint. After court approval, recovered reserves helped repay the lender and employee health fund. It did not erase every loss. We sold 6 tractors and the unused Superior Warehouse Annex. Some routes were combined. Bonuses were suspended for 1 quarter. but nobody lost health coverage, nobody arrived on Friday wondering whether payroll would clear. Kelsey's cooperation agreement came 3 months after the auction. She admitted signing the first false report, helping deliver the public statement and failing to preserve records after she suspected Nolan had lied. In exchange for truthful cooperation, prosecutors agreed not to pursue the most serious conspiracy theory unless new evidence proved she knew about the shell payments. The agreement did not declare her innocent. She lost her executive position. Her shares entered a restitution trust. Part of her future earnings would repay the employee benefit fund and investigative costs. When Priya explained the terms, she watched my face. You cannot negotiate this for her. I know. 6 months earlier, I would have challenged every clause and called it protection. This time, Kelsey made her own decision. She signed. I returned as temporary chief executive because the lender required stable leadership. The first morning back, I found Owen's office exactly as Nolan had left it. A new desk. New glass shelves. The wall map removed. Owen's old chair pushed into storage. I brought the chair back, then I sat in it and realized I did not want the job. For 34 years, Owen and I had spoken about the company as if it were another member of the family. We protected it, sacrificed for it and expected Kelsey to inherit the burden whether she wanted it or not. Nolan had exploited that concentration. One family held the authority. One daughter carried the expectation. One son-in-law only needed to control the people at the center. Returning everything to the old structure would restore the same weakness. Tessa came back after an independent review reversed her suspension and awarded back pay. On her first day, she dropped a proposal on my desk. Employee ownership. The plan created an employee stock ownership trust holding 51% of Whitaker Cold Freight. The remaining shares would be divided among a lender-approved reserve, management incentives, and my family trust, with limits preventing any one person from controlling operations. Employees would elect board representatives. Major asset sales would require independent review and a worker vote. You understand employees share the risk too, I said. They already shared the risk. They just never shared the power. We held the vote in the same depot where Nolan had tried to sell everything. Mechanics voted in coveralls. Drivers came through between routes. The conversion passed with 87% support. Tessa stood beside me. I'm wondering what Owen would say. I told her. He'd ask whether the trucks are moving. Outside, they were. That evening, I unscrewed the brass plate from the executive parking space. Mara Whitaker, co-founder. I carried it to the company archive. My house already contained enough objects pretending to be people. Kelsey wrote from the supervised restitution program where she was completing compliance work in counseling while the criminal case continued. Her first letter was 6 pages. She apologized, defended herself, then apologized for defending herself. Nolan had not begun by asking her to betray us. He began by agreeing with every wound she carried. He remembered the birthday dinner I left early. Every holiday interrupted by a breakdown, storm or driver emergency. He told her my absence meant she was never important enough. Nolan was responsible for using her pain as a weapon. Kelsey was responsible for what she did with it, and I was responsible for giving that pain so much empty space to grow. Those truths could exist together. Her letter ended with one question. Do you believe there is anything left of us? I did not answer immediately. Forgiveness written too quickly would become another decision I made for both of us. I needed to know whether I was ready to meet the woman she had become. Not the daughter I believed I had raised. A week later, I bought a blank card. 3 days after that, I wrote one sentence. There is something left, but we will have to build it honestly. I did not tell her everything was forgiven. I mailed the card. On my final morning as temporary chief executive, snow covered the Duluth yard before sunrise. The original refrigerated truck sat near the maintenance bay. Its paint had faded, and the cab heater needed 3 tries. We kept it for training and local charity deliveries because Owen had refused to sell the first machine that carried our name. A young driver started it for a rural clinic delivery. The engine coughed once and settled into its familiar vibration. I carried Owen's marked dispatch notebook upstairs to the archive room. The page with Unit 714. 2:17 a.m. remained folded where he had left it. I placed the notebook inside an evidence box beside our first route map, incorporation papers, and the brass plate from my parking space. Then I closed the lid. For months, I wondered whether stepping away meant abandoning Owen's legacy. Standing there, I understood what he had tried to tell me: a company that could survive only through our control had never truly survived us. I walked downstairs and crossed the yard. Drivers checked seals. Mechanics raised bay doors. Dispatchers called route changes. Nobody stopped working to watch me leave. That was how it should have been. The original truck rolled through the gate before sunrise. Its red lights disappeared into the snow while Lake Superior faded behind the storm. I walked past the idling fleet without turning around. Winning had not restored my husband or erased my daughter's choices. It had not returned the years we spent treating love like something that could wait until the work was finished. Winning meant Nolan could never use the company, its ownership or our need to protect it as a chain around another person again. For the first time, Whitaker Cold Freight did not belong to one family, and the people I loved no longer belonged to it.